Chapter 1. The Factory of Excellence, where curiosity is politely discouraged. Singapore likes to market its education system the way luxury brands sell watches: precision-engineered, immaculately efficient, expensive, exclusive, and guaranteed to outperform whatever messy, emotional, inefficient system other countries are still embarrassing themselves with. From the outside, it looks flawless. Test scores so high they practically levitate. International rankings that trigger applause at global conferences. Ministers smiling as if intelligence itself were a natural resource they successfully mined. But let's stop clapping for a moment, because when a system produces results this consistently, the question stops being, how good is it? And becomes, what exactly is it producing? Geniuses? Or very expensive, well-behaved photocopiers? Singapore's education system does not begin with curiosity. It begins with sorting. Early, aggressively, with a calm smile and a spreadsheet. Children are assessed, streamed, ranked, tracked, and labelled before most of them have learned what thinking actually feels like. The message is subtle but relentless. You are not here to explore who you are. You are here to find out where you fit. The language is always polite. Pathways, optimization, talent matching. What it really means is this: deviation is inefficient. Curiosity that cannot be measured is suspicious. Questions without clear answers are inconvenient. Creativity that cannot be converted into grades is a waste of time and oxygen. This is not an accident. It is a design choice. Singapore does not want chaos. Chaos does not scale. Chaos does not attract investors. Chaos does not look good in PowerPoint slides presented to global elites who want stability, predictability, and returns. So the education system becomes a pre-training program for compliance, not crude obedience, sophisticated obedience, the kind that smiles, performs, and never asks the wrong questions in the wrong room. Students learn early that success is not about thinking differently, it's about thinking correctly. Correctly means efficiently. Efficiently means aligned with expectations. The exams don't just test knowledge, they test temperament. Can you endure pressure without complaint? Can you absorb rules without questioning their origin? Can you perform brilliance on command? Those who can are rewarded, those who can't are gently, mercilessly redirected. This is where the genius myth begins to crack. True innovation is messy, it's slow, it's argumentative, it produces failure long before it produces value. It requires tolerance for discomfort, contradiction, and inefficiency. Singapore's system treats those qualities like software bugs. When creativity does appear, it is usually sandboxed. Approved creativity. Innovation with guardrails. Thinking outside the box, provided the box remains intact and government certified. Students learn to optimize answers, not challenge premises. To chase rubrics, not meaning. To win, not to wonder. By the time they graduate, many are extremely capable, sharp, polished, globally competitive, and deeply cautious. This is not the education of rebels. This is the education of high-functioning custodians of the status quo, which is very impressive if your goal is to run a perfectly managed city-state. Less impressive if your goal is to cultivate minds that might one day ask uncomfortable questions like, why does this system exist? Who benefits from this definition of success? What happens if we are wrong? Those questions rarely make it onto standardized tests. So let's be honest in Chapter 1, before the marketing slogans return. Singapore's education system is not broken. It works exactly as intended. The real question is not whether it produces excellence. It does. The question is what kind of excellence it is willing to tolerate, and more dangerously, what kind of thinking it quietly teaches students to suppress. If this chapter made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is the beginning of independent thought. Algorithms hate it, by the way, which is why you should like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still thinks rankings equal wisdom. The streaming illusion. How average becomes a life sentence. Singapore insists that streaming is not labeling. It is appropriate placement, gentle, scientific, almost caring, like being sorted by a very polite algorithm that swears it only wants the best for you. This is a lie everyone agrees to tell children with a straight face. Streaming is introduced as efficiency. Different abilities, different speeds, different tracks. Sounds reasonable until you notice how early it starts and how rarely it forgives. Once you are placed, the system remembers you better than you remember yourself. Fail early, and the system never forgets. Succeed early, and the system never lets you relax. The most brutal part is not being labelled weak. It's being labelled average. Average in Singapore is not neutral. It is a quiet social verdict. It means you are functional, replaceable, and unlikely to surprise anyone. You are not failing, so no one worries about you. You are not excelling, so no one invests in you. You simply exist, efficiently. Students in the middle tracks learn something far more powerful than math or science. They learn expectations. Low, invisible expectations that settle into the bones. Teachers, often unintentionally, adjust their tone. Parents recalibrate their dreams. Society subtly narrows the range of what feels realistic, not cruelly, calmly, with spreadsheets. And here's the psychological trick. Once a child internalizes the idea that they are not that kind of student, curiosity becomes dangerous. Asking too many questions risks exposing limits. Trying something new risks confirming mediocrity. So they stop trying in ways that matter. This is not a failure of discipline. It is a success of conditioning. High-track students are trained to perform under pressure. Mid-track students are trained to comply without ambition. Low-track students are trained to accept constraint as destiny. All of them learn the same underlying lesson. The system knows you better than you know yourself. In theory, movement between tracks is possible. In practice, it's rare enough to be used as propaganda. A motivational anecdote rolled out at speeches like proof of fairness. One escape story used to justify 1,000 locked doors. Streaming doesn't just sort students by ability, it sorts them by confidence, by risk tolerance, by how loudly they believe they are allowed to exist. By adulthood, the effects are invisible but permanent. You get a workforce that is competent, cautious, and deeply aware of where not to step. People who self-censor before authority even enters the room. And this is where the obedience training accusation stops sounding dramatic and starts sounding accurate. Because obedience is not about following orders. It's about internalizing limits so thoroughly that no orders are necessary. Singapore didn't invent this, it just perfected it. With better lighting and international awards. If you're wondering why so many adults here hesitate before speaking freely, before changing careers, before questioning institutions, the answer is not fear. It's habit. Habit formed at age 10, reinforced at 12, normalized by 18. This is what an efficient system looks like when it grows up. And before anyone rushes to defend it, yes, it produces stability. Yes, it produces results. Yes, many people thrive within it. But systems should not only be judged by who succeeds, they should be judged by what kind of silence they produce among everyone else. If this chapter hit a nerve, excellent. That nerve is called critical thinking, and it does atrophy without use. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it before the algorithm politely buries it. Chapter 3. Meritocracy as moral theatre, when privilege learns to call itself virtue. Singapore loves the word meritocracy the way religions love sacred texts. It explains everything, justifies everything, ends conversations before they become uncomfortable. If you succeed, you earned it. If you fail, you didn't try hard enough. Case closed. Applause. Rankings updated. Meritocracy in Singapore is not merely an organizing principle, it is a moral framework, a personality test disguised as policy. It doesn't just measure performance, it assigns worth. From childhood, students absorb a dangerous equation: achievement equals virtue. Grades are not feedback, they are proof of character. Discipline becomes morality, efficiency becomes goodness. This is where the system stops being educational and starts being theological, because once success is framed as moral superiority, inequality no longer needs defending. It becomes deserved, natural, almost comforting. Children from stable households with tutors, quiet study spaces, emotionally present parents, and financial buffers are not described as privileged. They are described as hard-working. Children without these advantages are not unlucky, they are unmotivated. The system does not deny inequality. It simply rebrands it as effort. And this is the genius of the setup. Structural advantages are laundered into personal virtue so cleanly that even the beneficiaries believe the myth, especially the beneficiaries. By adulthood, many high achievers genuinely think their success is proof of intrinsic excellence. Not contextual alignment, not timing, not support. Excellence. This belief is incredibly useful to the state. People who view their status as morally earned will defend the system fiercely. Any criticism sounds like an attack on their identity. Question the system, and you are not debating policy. You are insulting people. Failure, on the other hand, becomes unbearable. In a true meritocracy, failure should be information, a signal to adjust systems, support structures, or expectations. In Singapore's version, failure feels like confession. People don't say, "This didn't work." They say, "I am not good enough." This is why mental health struggles here are often silent, polished, and hidden behind productivity. Admitting burnout feels like admitting fraud. Admitting struggle feels like moral weakness, so people suffer quietly, efficiently, without disrupting GDP. Meritocracy also discourages solidarity. Why empathize with someone who chose to fail? Why question a system that rewarded you? This produces a society that is orderly, competitive, and emotionally distant. People are kind but cautious, helpful but calculating. Success is admired. Failure is avoided, not assisted. And innovation. Real innovation struggles here, because innovation requires the right to fail without shame. It requires environments where mistakes are not character flaws, where risk is not punished socially. A culture that moralizes success cannot tolerate visible failure, so experimentation stays conservative. Startups copy proven models. Creativity follows approved templates. Risk is minimized, not embraced. Meritocracy, when taken to this extreme, does not produce daring thinkers. It produces anxious overachievers and invisible underperformers. Both are exhausted, and both are taught never to blame the system. If this chapter made you defensive, pause. Defensiveness is usually a sign that an idea touched identity, not logic. Subscribe, like, share. Not because the algorithm deserves it, but because discussions like this do not survive on politeness alone. Chapter 4 will move from ideology to behavior, how years of surveillance, assessment, and ranking shape adult speech, creativity, and the instinct to self-censor before anyone asks. Chapter 4. The surveillance mind. When nobody is watching and you still behave by adulthood, Singaporeans do something remarkable. They censor themselves automatically. No memo required, no warning issued, no authority present. The system has already moved inside their heads. This is the final product of the education pipeline. Not just skilled workers, not just disciplined professionals, but people who instinctively ask one question before speaking, creating, or acting. Is this safe? Safe does not mean true. Safe does not mean interesting. Safe means non-disruptive, non-embarrassing, non-actionable. Years of tests, rankings, evaluations, teacher comments, peer comparison, and institutional feedback create a habit stronger than fear. Anticipation. People learn to predict consequences before ideas fully form. So they trim thoughts mid-sentence. They soften opinions before expressing them. They translate curiosity into something measurable or keep it private. This is why discussions in public spaces often feel polished but shallow, why meetings are efficient but strangely bloodless, why creativity appears competent yet cautious. Nobody explicitly says, "Don't challenge this." The system doesn't need to. You already know. Education trains students to perform under observation. Life continues the lesson: performance reviews, KPI dashboards, compliance training, reputation management. Everything is tracked, scored, and archived somewhere. Over time, people stop asking whether an idea is good. They ask whether it will be misunderstood. Misinterpretation is treated as a personal failure, not a systemic risk. So people choose silence, or irony, or neutral phrasing that says nothing but sounds correct. This creates a strange contradiction. Singapore wants innovation, but distrusts unpredictability. It celebrates creativity, but only after it has been proven elsewhere. It encourages entrepreneurship, but punishes visible failure. So adults become excellent executors of other people's ideas. This is not because they lack imagination. It's because imagination without permission feels irresponsible. The education system did not teach people to be obedient in a crude way. It taught them to be reasonable. Reasonable people do not cause trouble. Reasonable people do not ask questions without deliverables. And reasonable people do not disrupt systems that reward them for staying reasonable. The cost shows up quietly. In art that feels safe. In startups that look like case studies. In conversations that end just before they get interesting. Most tragically, it shows up in people who no longer trust their own instincts unless validated by authority, degrees, titles, institutions, rankings. Internal confidence outsourced to external approval. This is obedience without orders, compliance without coercion, and it is very efficient. If you are listening to this and feeling uneasy, good. Unease is a sign you still notice the walls. Like the video, subscribe, share it while you still remember how. Chapter 5 will be the confrontation. What Singapore gains from this system, what it loses, and whether genius can survive in a place that confuses order with wisdom. Chapter 5. Order, Genius, and the Price of Being Perfect. Let's be fair, because fairness is Singapore's favourite aesthetic. Singapore gains a lot from this education system: stability, predictability, a workforce that shows up on time, hits targets, and does not romanticize disruption for its own sake. Investors love it. Governments envy it. International rankings applaud it like a trained audience. This is not accidental success. This is controlled success. The system produces people who can execute complex plans flawlessly, scale proven ideas efficiently, and maintain social order without needing loud enforcement. That is an extraordinary achievement. Many societies fail at this completely. But here's the trade-off: no brochure likes to print. Genius does not thrive in environments obsessed with correctness. Genius is inconvenient. It asks questions before permission is granted. It breaks things that appear to be working. It tolerates embarrassment, inefficiency, and social friction. Singapore's system can recognize genius once it is safe, once it has credentials, once it wins awards elsewhere. Imported genius is celebrated. Homegrown unpredictability is managed. The education system does not kill creativity outright. That would be crude. It teaches creativity to behave, to wait its turn, to justify itself in advance, to submit a proposal before daring to exist. As a result, many bright minds here do not disappear. They adapt. They become consultants, analysts, managers, optimizers, people who improve systems instead of reinventing them. This is valuable work. It is also limiting. A society optimized for order will always struggle with original thought that threatens that order. Not because leaders are malicious, but because the entire structure rewards continuity. Disruption is treated as a bug, not a feature. So the final answer is uncomfortable but simple. Singapore's education system is not designed to cultivate rebels. It is designed to cultivate custodians, guardians of a system that prioritizes harmony, efficiency, and global respectability over existential questioning. If you define genius as scoring well, performing reliably, and fitting elegantly into global capitalism, then yes, it cultivates genius at scale. If you define genius as the ability to imagine radically different futures and risk being wrong in public, then no. That kind of mind often learns early to stay quiet or leave. And many do leave. The real tragedy is not obedience. It's unused imagination. People who could have questioned assumptions instead perfecting them. People who could have challenged definitions of success instead optimizing within them. The system works. The cost is subtle. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. If this series made you think instead of just nod, then don't waste that rare moment. Subscribe, like the video, share it before comfort closes back in. Algorithms reward obedience too. Don't give them all the power.